Imagine you're a starship captain. Your orders come from the United Earth Directorate. They are law. They are morality. They are survival itself. Now, imagine those orders tell you to commit an act so fundamentally wrong that the universe itself would rather unexist than allow it to happen. What do? Most would say impossible. Some would say treason. A few might whisper sacrifice. Captain Alara Vin said none of those things. She looked at the order. She looked at her crew. She looked at the cold, indifferent mathematics of reality. And then she smiled. Not because she had a solution, but because she finally understood why humanity had survived every single extinction-level threat the galaxy had thrown at them for 2,000 years. We don't break the rules because we're strong. We break them because we're too stubborn to accept that they exist. This is the story of the worst decision any human captain has ever made. The crime that saved a billion lives. And the 5 minutes that broke time itself. Buckle up. It's going to get weird. The weight of impossible paperwork, Captain Alara Van had been awake for 37 hours when the order arrived. She stood on the observation deck of the UES Resolute, watching a binary star system tear itself apart 50 light-years away. The twin suns spiraled toward collision, their death dance throwing off radiation bursts that painted her ship's shields in shimmering auroras. Beautiful, terrifying, utterly indifferent to the small mammals watching from a safe distance. Her coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. She'd forgotten to drink it anyway. Captain, Lieutenant Marcus Webb appeared in the doorway, his datapad held like a priest carrying a cursed relic. His face was pale, not the usual pale of long shifts and recycled air. Pale like someone had reached inside his chest and squeezed. Alara turned slowly. What is it, Marcus? Priority Alpha transmission from Directorate Command. His voice cracked on the word Alpha. Encryption level, none. That made her straighten. No encryption meant the message was meant to be seen, meant to be witnessed, meant to leave no doubt about who sent it and what it contained. Play it. The holographic emitter on her wrist flickered, and Admiral Tsu emerged in blue light. The old man looked worse than she remembered. His eyes had the hollow quality of someone who'd stopped sleeping after the 4th extinction-level threat of the decade. Captain Van, he said, no preambid, no pleasantrias. The hive is 3 weeks from the Sol Ring. We have exhausted all conventional options. The Science Directorate has authorized one final protocol. He paused, swallowed. For a moment, he looked like a grandfather about to tell a child that the family dog had died. You are hereby ordered to execute Operation Shattered Glass. Full details are attached. Authorization code, TSU, Omega 7. No confirmation required. No confirmation possible after transmission ends. You are the only ship within range of the target coordinates. The hologram flickered. May whatever gods you believe in forgive us all. Sue out. The blue light died. Alara stood perfectly still for 5 full seconds. Then, she turned to Marcus. Give me the full brief. Now. The briefing room smelled like old coffee and suppressed panic. Alara sat at the head of the table, surrounded by her senior officers. Commander Priya Kaitan, her first officer and closest friend for 12 years. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo, chief engineer, whose hands never stopped moving even when he was asleep. Dr. Helena Weiss, ship's physician, and the only person aboard who could make Alara laugh during a crisis. And Ensign Damas Reyes, the youngest officer on the bridge, who had no business being in this room except that his specialty was theoretical astrophysics, and this mission was going to need someone who understood the kind of math that gave normal people nosebleeds. Priya spoke first. Alara, what did Sue send us? Alara pressed a button on the table. The holographic display showed a star chart, then zoomed past 100 light-years, then 1,000, until it settled on a region of space so empty that cartographers had labeled it the quiet. No stars, no planets, no dust, just an expanse of nothing so complete that it took ships 3 weeks to cross, even with FTL. The hive, Alara said quietly. We all know what it is. 30 billion sentient minds, networked into a single consciousness. They've consumed 17 civilizations in the last 4 centuries. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They just grow. David leaned forward. We've been fighting them for 60 years. Lost every major engagement. What's different now? The Science Directorate found something. Alara tapped the display. The quiet isn't empty. It's a quantum resonance dead zone. No entanglement. No superposition collapse. Just absolute, perfect stillness at the subatomic level. Tomas's eyes went wide. That's impossible. Quantum fields fluctuate everywhere. It's a fundamental property of space-time. Apparently not everywhere. Alera's voice was flat. The Hive discovered this region 300 years ago. They've been using it as a nursery. Their young gestate in the stillness, immune to quantum decoherence, which means they emerge with perfect memory retention from the moment of conception. Every Hive soldier remembers everything its ancestors learned. For 300 generations, the room went cold. So the Hive we've been fighting, Priya said slowly, is just the vanguard. The real army is still growing in the quiet. Worse, Alera pulled up the final section of the brief. In 3 weeks, the first wave of mature Hive warriors will emerge. According to director projections, they will reach Seoul in 11 days after that. Earth's defenses will last approximately 4 hours. She let that sink in. Marcus, who had been standing by the door, finally spoke. What's Operation Shattered Glass? Alera looked at Tomas. You're going to want to sit down for this. The Ensign Saturday Shattered Glass requires us to collapse the quantum resonance dead zone, Alera said. Force the quiet to become noisy, chaotic. The Hive young are adapted to absolute stillness. If we introduce quantum fluctuation at sufficient magnitude, their neural networks will experience a cascade failure. Every Hive individual in the nursery zone will die within seconds. Tomas's mouth opened. Closed. Open again. Captain, that's not possible. You can't just make quantum fields fluctuate. They're a foundational layer of reality. You'd have to violate the Pauli exclusion principle, Alera finished. Yes, I know. The silence that followed was the loudest sound Alera had ever heard. The Pauli exclusion principle wasn't just a law of physics. It was the law of physics. The rule that said 2 fermions couldn't occupy the same quantum state simultaneously. The rule that kept electrons from collapsing into nuclei. The rule that made matter matter instead of an infinitely dense point of existential screaming. Violating it wasn't like breaking the speed limit. It was like breaking the concept of roads. David stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Captain, with respect, that's insane. The energy required alone is available, Alera said. We're carrying a Mark 7 0-point reactor. If we channel its full output through the main deflector and modulate the the phase array, at a specific frequency, we can create a temporary local violation. Duration, approximately 5 minutes. 5 minutes of what? Dr. Weiss asked quietly. 5 minutes where the universe forgets how to be the universe, Alera said. Within a radius of 12 light-years, the Pauli exclusion principle stops applying. Electrons will share orbitals. Protons will occupy the same space. Atomic nuclei will merge spontaneously. Everything will dissolve, Tomas whispered. Every molecule, every cell, every atom in the blast radius will undergo immediate, uncontrolled collapse into a quark-gluon plasma. Yes, including us? Alera met his eyes. Including us. Marcus grabbed the edge of the table. His knuckles went white. So let me understand this. Our orders are to fly into the middle of enemy territory. Turn on a machine that breaks the most fundamental rule of existence. Dissolve ourselves, our ship, and everything within 12 light-years in a subatomic soup. And somehow this saves Earth. The Hive nursery is 11.7 light-years across, Alera said. The overlap is sufficient. Every Hive individual in gestation dies. The mature Hive lose their future generations. Without reinforcements, the existing Hive forces can be contained by the combined fleets of the Galactic Alliance. For how long? Priya asked. Long enough to evacuate Earth. No one spoke. Alera looked around the table at her officers. At people she'd shared meals with, celebrated promotions with, watched break down and rebuild themselves after losses. They were good people, the best people, and she was about to ask them to commit suicide. Not suicide in the heroic, last stand sense. Suicide in the unmake reality sense. There would be no bodies to recover. No memorias. No graves. Just a patch of space where the laws of physics had briefly gone mad, and then a silent, empty ship that never reported back. There's more, Alera said quietly. The directorate didn't put this in the brief. I found it in the classified appendix. She pulled up a secondary file. Mathematical models, quantum simulations, and, at the bottom, a single line of text in red. Local reality breach may have causal propagation effects. Further study required. Tomas read it 3 times. His face went from pale to gray. Captain, causal propagation effects means, say it, Tomas. It means breaking the Pauli exclusion principle doesn't just affect the local region. The violation creates a shockwave in the fabric of causality itself. Effects could ripple backward in time, forward, sideways. We have no way to predict the consequences because the equations literally break when you try to solve them. So we might not just die, David said slowly. We might make it so we never existed in the first place. Or make it so Earth never existed, Dr. Weiss added. Or make it so the hive wins in every timeline simultaneously. Alara nodded. Those are among the less catastrophic possibilities. Priya stood up, walked to the viewport, stared at the dying binary stars. Alara, she said without turning around, you're going to refuse this order. It wasn't a question. Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to her first officer's side, and placed a hand on her shoulder. I was going to, she said softly, for about 30 seconds. Then I checked the casualty projections if we don't do this. She pulled up the numbers on her wrist display. Priya looked. Her breath caught. 437 billion, Alara said. That's how many sentient beings die if the hive reaches Earth and uses our biomass to fuel their next expansion. Every human, every alliance member, every civilization within 500 light years. Gone. And if we do this? Marcus asked from the doorway. Unknown, Alara said. But the directorate's best models suggest a 72% chance that the quantum shockwave destabilizes the hive's neural network across all their nursery zones. Not just this one. The entire species could collapse within a generation. Or we could unravel the universe, Tomas muttered. Or we could unravel the universe, Alara agreed. But here's the thing. She turned to face her crew. The Pauli exclusion principle isn't a law because the universe has a police force. It's a law because it's never been observed to break. That's all. Every law of physics is just a description of what's happened so far, not what must happen. David frowned. Captain, with respect, that's philosophy. We're engineers. We deal with what is. Exactly. Alara smiled. It was not a comforting smile. We deal with what is. And, right now, what is that 437 billion people are going to die unless we do something impossible. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want honest answers. She looked at each of them in turn. If you knew, absolutely knew, that your children were going to be murdered unless you walked into a room and pushed a button that might destroy everything, would you push it? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. Priya's eyes glistened. She said nothing. David looked at his hands. The hands that had kept the Resolute flying through plasma storms and ion mines in 3 separate encounters with hive boarding parties. Those hands were shaking. I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's 7. She lives with my sister on Mars. Alara waited. If someone told me I could save her life by pushing a button that might kill me, he looked up, I'd push it before they finished the sentence. That's not the same as killing the universe, Tomas said. Isn't it? David's voice was harsh. You think the universe cares? The universe let the hive evolve. Let them consume 17 civilizations. Let them get within 3 weeks of my little girl. The universe doesn't have a plan, Tomas. It doesn't have a moral arc. It just is. And sometimes what is terrible. He stood up. I'll make the reactor do whatever you need, Captain. Just tell me when. Dr. Weiss touched Tomas's arm. Ensign, you're the physicist. What's your professional opinion? Tomas took a breath. Exhaled. His voice was steadier than Alara expected. Professionally? The math says we have no right to attempt this. The probability of catastrophic reality failure is too high to calculate with any confidence. The ethical implications of potentially destroying countless timelines, but, Alara prompted. Tomas met her eyes. But I also calculated the probability of the hive being stopped by any other means. It's 0.0004%. So professionally, I think the math is telling us something important. What's that? That sometimes the only way to win is to break the rules so completely that the game ends. Priya turned from the viewport. Her face was wet, but her jaw was set. Alara, I've followed you into worse situations. Not many, But a few. This is insane. This is arrogant. This is the kind of decision that gets taught in ethics classes as what not to do. She walked to Alara and gripped her shoulders. But you're not asking us to do this because you want to be a hero. You're asking because you genuinely believe it's the only way. And I trust you, even when you're wrong. Especially when you're wrong. Alara felt something crack inside her chest. Something she'd been holding together for 37 hours. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Priya released her and stepped back. We have 3 weeks to get to the quiet. That's a lot of time to find another solution. There is no other solution. Then, it's a lot of time to say goodbye. The Resolute jumped to FTL 4 hours later. Alara stood on the bridge, watching the starfield stretch in luminous threads. The binary system's death dance faded behind them. Ahead lay nothing but darkness and the impossible. She thought about her mother. Died in the first hive incursion 23 years ago. She thought about her father, who'd raised her alone on a research station at the edge of human space, teaching her that the universe was knowable and beautiful and safe if you just understood the rules. She thought about how wrong he'd been. Captain, Marcus's voice from the helm. Course laid in. ETA to the quiet. 20 days, 14 hours. Thank you, Lieutenant. Captain. He hesitated. I know this isn't the time, but I wanted to say my grandmother survived the Chicago fires. The ones during the resource wars. She used to tell me that the only reason humanity made it through was because someone, somewhere, always decided to do the wrong thing for the right reason. Alara raised an eyebrow. The wrong thing? Burning crops so the enemy couldn't take them. Sabotaging evacuation ships so they'd have to stay and fight. Killing one to save 100. Marcus shrugged. She said the universe doesn't reward goodness. It rewards effectiveness. And sometimes goodness and effectiveness are the same thing. And sometimes they're not. No, Marcus turned back to his console. But I think that's what makes us human. We know the difference. And we choose anyway. Alara stood in silence for a long time after that. 20 days until she broke the universe. She had a lot of thinking to do. The mathematics of Desperation Day 12 brought an unwelcome surprise. Alara was in the middle of a very vivid nightmare. Something about falling through a floor made of equations, when the proximity alarm jerked her awake. She was on the bridge in 90 seconds, still buttoning her uniform, hair a mess, coffee nowhere in sight. Report. Incoming Hive Scout ship, Marcus said, his fingers flying across the helm controls. They must have pickets on the approach to the quiet. We're being painted by targeting sensors. Evasive maneuvers. Signal the crew to battle stations. The Resolute shuddered as Marcus threw them into a sharp dive. Alara grabbed her command chair and held on. How many? Just one for now, Priya said from tactical. But it's a hunter-killer class. Fast, heavily armed, and if it gets a clean shot at our FTL drive, we're dead in the water. David, can you give me more power to the shields? The engineer's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, I can give you all the power. But the reactor's been running hot since we started this mission. If I push it too hard, we might get an unscheduled demonstration of what happens when zero-point energy decides it doesn't like its containment field. Define unscheduled demonstration. Everything within 500 kilometers turns into a briefly interesting cloud of exotic particles. So don't do that. I'll do my best, Captain. The Resolute bucked again. The lights flickered. On the main view screen, Alara could see the Hive ship, a jagged thing made of what looked like black chitin and pulsing bioluminescence. It moved like a shark. Hungry. Patient. They're not firing to kill, Priya said, frowning at her displays. They're hurting us. Pushing us toward the quiet. Why? Maybe they want to capture us. Interrogate us. Find out what we know. Tomas spoke up from the science station. Or maybe they know about Operation Shattered Glass. The bridge went quiet. How could they know? Alara asked. The Hive is a collective consciousness. If one of them learned about the operation from a captured human or an intercepted transmission, every Hive individual would know within seconds, including the ones in the quiet. So they're trying to stop us from getting close enough to activate the device. Or they're trying to make sure we activate it on their terms, Priya said slowly. Push us to a specific location. Let's think we're in control. Then, spring whatever trap they've prepared. Alara stared at the view screen. The Hive ship was still hurting them, firing precise shots that missed by meters, close enough to terrify, far enough to avoid destruction. "Marcus," she said, "can you get us past them without engaging?" "Maybe, but we'd have to drop out of FTL and make a run for its sublight. That'll add 3 days to our journey." "We don't have 3 days. Then we fight." Alara shook her head. "No, fighting is what they expect. Fighting is what they want. It gives them time to bring reinforcements." She turned to Tomas. "You said the hive and the quiet are adapted to absolute stillness. What happens if we introduce a small amount of quantum fluctuation? Not enough to kill them, just enough to annoy them." Tomas blinked. I don't know. The models don't cover partial fluctuations. It's like asking what happens if you partially violate the laws of gravity. The math doesn't have an answer." "Then, let's find out." Alara stood up. "David, can you route a fraction of the reactor's output to the phase array? Say 2%. 2% of break the universe is still a lot of energy, Captain. But it won't actually break the universe." "Probably not." David paused. "Define probably." "Good enough. Do it." The next 30 seconds were the longest of Alara's life. She watched on her display as David rerouted power, carefully bleeding energy from the 0-point reactor into the phase array. The ship hummed, vibrated, made a sound like a cello string being tightened past its breaking point. "Ready," David said. "Target the hive ship. Narrow beam. Fire." A pulse of blue-white light shot from the Resolute's deflector dish. It wasn't aimed at the ship itself. It was aimed at the space around the ship. A bubble of distorted reality, 12 kilometers across, where the Pauli exclusion principle became flexible. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the hive ship screamed. Not a sound. There was no sound in space. But the Resolute's sensors picked up a burst of electromagnetic radiation that translated into something horribly like a living thing in agony. The ship's bioluminescence flickered wildly. Its hull began to warp, chitin plates twisting as atoms that had no business sharing space were forced to coexist. The hive ship tried to fire. Its weapons glitched, energy beams scattering in random directions. It tried to flee. Its drive systems failed, sputtering like a dying animal. Within 10 seconds, the ship was dead. Not destroyed, simply non-functional. Its component parts still existed, but the consciousness that had animated them was gone, dissolved by the brief, tiny taste of quantum chaos. Silence on the bridge. Then, Marcus let out a breath. "What the hell just happened?" "We didn't kill them," Tomas said slowly. "We unmade the connections between their neurons. The hive mind relies on quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication across vast distances. When we introduced fluctuation, we severed those connections. Every hive individual in that ship just became alone, for the first time in their existence. They went insane," Priya said quietly. "They went silent," Alara corrected. "And that's worse." She turned to the view screen. The hive ship drifted dark and empty. "David, how long until we can fire again?" "The phase array needs 6 hours to cool down. And, Captain, that was 2%. If we'd used more, we might have caused a cascade that affected us too." "Noted. Get working on a way to shield the ship from the effect. We're going to need it. Shield the ship from a violation of the Pauli exclusion principle." David's voice was dry. "I'll add it to my list of impossible tasks, right after invent perpetual motion and teach a rock to sing. I have faith in you. That makes one of us." The hive didn't send another scout. For the next 8 days, the Resolute traveled through increasingly empty space. Stars faded. The cosmic microwave background grew dimmer. It felt like sailing into a held breath. Alara spent most of those days in the engine room, watching David work. He'd rigged a temporary shield, a magnetic field lined with something he called exotic matter foam, that might, under ideal conditions, protect the ship from the worst effects of the quantum fluctuation. Might, possibly, if the stars aligned and the laws of physics decided to be merciful. "They won't be," David said one night, or what passed for night on a ship with no day-night cycle. He was elbow-deep in a conduit, rerouting power couplings. "The laws of physics don't do mercy. They just do consequences. Then, we'll deal with the consequences." "You sound very certain for someone who's about to commit the biggest crime in universal history." Alara leaned against a bulkhead. "I'm not certain at all. I'm just out of better options." David pulled himself out of the conduit and sat on a tool crate. His face was streaked with grease and exhaustion. "Can I tell you something?" Something I haven't told anyone. Of course. When I said I'd push the button for my daughter, I meant it. But I didn't tell you the rest. He looked at his hands. I'm terrified. Not of dying. Of what happens after. Of waking up in some parallel timeline where I never had her. Or where she never existed. Or where I exist, but she doesn't remember me. Alara sat down next to him. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. No, I don't. She put a hand on his shoulder. But I know this. You love your daughter. That love is real. It exists right now, in this timeline, in this moment. And no amount of quantum weirdness can erase that it happened. David was quiet for a long time. Then he laughed, a short, broken sound. You know what she said to me before I left? My little girl. She said, Daddy, don't be scared. The universe is big, but you're bigger. Alara felt her throat tighten. She's right, Alara said. We are. Day 19. The Resolute dropped out of FTL at the edge of the quiet. The view screen showed nothing. Literally nothing. No stars. No planets. No dust. Just an endless, oppressive blackness that seemed to press against the hull like a living thing. Sensors are barely functional, Priya reported. The quantum stillness is interfering with our instrumentation. I'm getting ghost readings. Ignore the ghosts, Alara said. Plot a course to the center of the nursery zone. Maximum sublight. Course plotted. ETA, for hours. For hours. Alara looked around the bridge. Marcus at the helm, steady as always. Priya at tactical, her jaw tight. Tomas at science, muttering calculations to himself. And, over the comm, David in engineering, humming a lullaby Alara vaguely recognized. She thought about saying something. A speech. Words of encouragement. The kind of thing captains said in old movies before the final battle. Instead, she walked to the center of the bridge and sat down cross-legged on the floor. The crew stared at her. Captain, Marcus said, are you okay? No, Alara said. I'm terrified. I'm exhausted. I'm pretty sure I'm about to make the biggest mistake in human history. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. She patted the floor next to her. So sit down. All of you. We got 4 hours. Let's spend them together. One by one, they sat. Priya on her left. Marcus on her right. Tomas cross-legged like Alara, his knees knocking against hers. Dr. Weiss appeared from the medical bay and sat behind them, wrapping her arms around Tomas's shoulders. David's voice came over the comm, still humming, but softer now. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Marcus spoke. My grandmother also used to say that courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. Smart woman, Alara said. She was a terrible cook, though. Once set the kitchen on fire, making toast. Priya snorted. How do you set fire to toast? You'd be surprised. They talked. Not about the mission. Not about death or quantum mechanics or the end of the universe. They talked about stupid things. Bad food. Embarrassing moments. The time Tomas accidentally called his commanding officer mom during a drill. The time David tried to fix a plasma conduit with duct tape and almost blew a hole in the hull. The time Alara got so lost in a maintenance shaft that they had to send a rescue party. They laughed. Real laughter. The kind that hurt your stomach and made your eyes water. And when the 4 hours were up, they stood. Brushed off their uniforms. Wiped their eyes. Positions, Alara said quietly. They moved to their stations. The bridge came alive with readiness reports. Power levels. Shield status. The phase array, humming with barely contained energy. Alara sat in her command chair. Took a breath. Marcus, take us in. The 5 minutes that broke time, the center of the quiet, was exactly like the edges. Empty. Dark. Silent. Except for the hive. As the Resolute approached, the view screen began to show them. Millions of organic structures floating in the void, each one the size of a small moon. The hive's nursery chambers. Inside each chamber, thousands of developing warriors suspended in quantum stillness, dreaming their ancestral dreams. My God, Dr. Weiss whispered. There must be billions of them. Trillions, Tomas corrected. The sensors are barely registering the outer layer. The nursery extends for light years in every direction. Alara stared at the display. So many lives, so many minds, all of them about to end. She thought about the hive, about what they were, about what they'd done, about the 17 civilizations they'd consumed, about Earth, about David's daughter, about her mother. She thought about the order. David, she said, status of the phase array. Ready, Captain. The exotic matter shield is active. We should survive the initial fluctuation. After that, he paused. After that, we're in uncharted territory. Understood. Priya, target the center of the nursery zone. Maximum dispersion. Target lock. Alara's hand hovered over the firing control. Captain, Tomas said suddenly. I'm picking up something. A transmission from a hive. Translated. Tomas's face went pale. Captain, it's a request for parley. The bridge went absolutely still. The hive doesn't parley, Priya said. They don't negotiate. They don't even communicate except to issue ultimatums. They're doing it now, Tomas said. They're offering to withdraw from human space. To cede all territory within 100 light years of Sol. They're offering a truce while they develop the ultimate weapon. Probably, Tomas agreed. But, Captain, what if they're sincere? What if they've seen what we can do and decided that coexistence is better than annihilation? The hive has never chosen coexistence. Ever. There's a first time for everything. Alara looked at her crew, saw the doubt in their eyes, the hope, the desperate, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to do this. She understood. She felt it too. But she also remembered the casualty projections. 437 billion dead. The end of humanity. The end of everything she loved. Marcus, she said, do you trust me? Marcus didn't hesitate. With my life, Captain. Priya, always. Thomas, the young ensign, took a breath. The math says no. But you're not math, Captain. You're a person. And I trust people more than I trust numbers. David, over the comm. David's voice was steady. Already pushed the button, Captain. Just waiting for you to catch up. Alara closed her eyes. She thought about her father. About the research station. About the stars. She opened her eyes. Priya. Fire. The universe broke. Not in a dramatic way. Not with thunder or lightning or cosmic trumpets. It broke quietly, like a glass tipping over on a silent table. One moment, the Pauli exclusion principle held. Electrons stayed in their shells. Protons stayed in their nuclei. Matter stayed matter. The next moment it didn't. Alara felt it before she saw it. A sensation like being turned inside out. Like every cell in her body suddenly remembered that it was mostly empty space and decided to fill that space with something. The exotic matter shield flickered. Held. Flickered again. On the view screen, the hive nursery chambers began to dissolve. Not explode. Not burn. Dissolve. The organic structures unwound like knitted sweaters being pulled by invisible hands. The developing warriors inside them, trillions of them, simply stopped being separate, became clouds of quarks and leptons and things that had no names because nothing had ever observed them before. It was beautiful. It was horrible. It was the most wrong thing Alara had ever seen. Shield at 60%, David reported. The fluctuation is spreading faster than predicted. We're getting backwash from the resonance. Can you compensate? I'm trying. But, Captain, something's wrong. The fluctuation isn't staying localized. It's propagating along quantum entanglement lines. It's spreading through the hive's neural network. To where? Everywhere. Alara stared at the display. The wave of dissolution was spreading faster than light. Not through space, but through connection. Every hive individual that was quantum entangled with another was catching the fluctuation like a disease. The nursery zone was ground zero, but the effect was rippling outward across the galaxy along the invisible threads that bound the hive together. They're all dying, Tomas whispered. Every hive individual in the galaxy. The fluctuation is following their communications network. It's reaching them all. How long? At this rate? 8 minutes until every hive consciousness is severed. 12 minutes until every hive body dissolves. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. She had just committed genocide. Not of a city, not of a planet, not of a species, of an entire civilization. 30 billion minds. Gone. Captain, David said urgently. The exotic matter shield is failing. The fluctuation is starting to affect our own ship. I'm seeing quantum decoherence in the hull plating. How bad? Bad. We have maybe 2 minutes before the effect reaches the crew quarters. Can you reroute power? I'm trying. But the reactor is... Captain, the reactor is resonating with the fluctuation. It's amplifying the effect. Alara's mind raced. The zero-point reactor was designed to extract energy from quantum fluctuations. If it was resonating with the fluctuation they'd created, it would keep amplifying the effect indefinitely. The wave would never stop. It would spread beyond the hive, beyond the galaxy, beyond the universe. Shut down the reactor, she ordered. I can't. The fluctuation is interfering with the containment field. If I try to shut it down manually, it'll breach. Then do it remotely. Same problem. The controls are quantum locked. The fluctuation is making them read as every possible state simultaneously. Tomas looked up from his console. Captain, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. The fluctuation is spreading through quantum entanglement. If we could create an anti-fluctuation, a wave of opposite phase that cancels out the first one, we might be able to stop the propagation. Can we do that? With the phase array, yes. But we'd have to fire it directly into the heart of the fluctuation, the exact center of the quantum disturbance, which is where? The reactor core. Alara closed her eyes. If we fire the phase array at the reactor, she said slowly, we're not just breaking the Pauli exclusion principle. We're breaking it twice, at the same point in space. The two fluctuations should annihilate each other, Tomas said. In theory, in theory, in theory. What happens to us? Tomas was quiet for a moment. The exotic matter shield won't survive the double fluctuation. The ship will be exposed to the full effect. Everyone aboard will dissolve. Alara finished. Yes. Silence. Then Marcus spoke. Captain, the hive is gone. The nursery is gone. We've done what we came to do. If we don't stop the fluctuation, it'll keep spreading. It'll reach Earth in, how long, Tomas? 3 hours. Maybe less. So we stop it. Marcus's voice was calm. We stop it, and we go out the way we came in. Together. Alara looked around the bridge. At her crew. Her family. David, she said, can you aim the phase array from engineering? I can. But, Captain, no buts. Tomas, calculate the firing solution. Priya, get everyone to the bridge. I want us all together for this. Alara. Priya's voice cracked. Alara, please. No time for please. Alara stood up, walked to the center of the bridge, sat down cross-legged on the floor. Come on, sit with me. They sat, just like before. Priya on her left, Marcus on her right, Tomas cross-legged, Dr. Weiss behind them, arms around as many people as she could reach. David's voice over the comm, still humming that lullaby. David, Alara said, whenever you're ready. Captain. David paused. Thank you for giving me a chance to save my daughter. Thank you for being brave enough to take it. Firing in 3, 2. The second fluctuation was worse than the first. Alara felt her atoms try to leave her body, felt the boundaries between herself and the universe grow thin. She could see the others, not with her eyes, but with something deeper. Their thoughts, their memories, their love. Marcus thinking about his grandmother's terrible cooking. Priya remembering the day she met Alara 12 years ago on a ship that smelled like ozone and desperation. Tomas running through equations, always running through equations, even now. Dr. Weiss holding them all, fiercely, like she could keep them together through sheer force of will. David humming, just humming. And Alara herself, thinking about her mother, about the stars, about the choice she'd made. She felt the two fluctuations meet, felt them cancel each other out, not with violence, but with something like relief. Like the universe exhaling after holding its breath for too long. The dissolution stopped. The quantum stillness returned. And the Resolute fell silent. Alara opened her eyes. She was lying on the bridge floor. The lights were off. The air was cold. Her body ached like she'd been hit by a planet. Priya, she croaked. A groan from her left. Here. Marcus. Ow. Tomas. Dr. Weiss. Present. Tomas's voice was weak, but alive. Mostly. David. David. Comain. Static. Then, faintly, Captain. The reactor's offline. The fluctuation is gone. But, you need to see this. Alara dragged herself to her feet. The view screen was dark, but the emergency backup flickered to life. The quiet was no longer quiet. Stars. Thousands of them. Millions. Billions. Where there had been nothing but void, now there was light. Nebulae. Galaxies. The entire region was filled with the birth of new suns. What happened? Alara whispered. Tomas limped to the science station. His fingers danced over dead displays, coaxing them back to life. The quantum fluctuation, it didn't just dissolve the hive. It released all the energy they'd been storing, all the mass they'd accumulated, all the potential they'd locked away in their nursery. He looked up, eyes wide. Captain, we didn't just stop the hive. We created a star nursery. In a few million years, this region will be teeming with new solar systems, new planets, new life. Alara stared at the view screen, at the impossible beauty of it. We broke the universe, she said slowly, and it fixed itself better than before. Apparently so. She turned to her crew, bruised, exhausted, alive. Marcus, can you get us moving? I could try, Captain. He limped to the helm. Where to? Alara thought about it. About Earth. About the war that was over. About the billions of lives they'd saved. About the trillions they'd ended. Home, she said. Take us home. 3 weeks later, the Resolute limped into orbit around Mars. The reception was overwhelming. News drones, escort ships, a full fleet formation, firing salute after salute. Admiral Sue himself waiting on the docking bay, looking like a man who'd seen a miracle and wasn't sure he believed in them. Alara walked off the ship on shaky legs. Her crew followed. David was carried on a stretcher, but he was grinning. His daughter was waiting on the dock. She broke away from her aunt and ran to him, sobbing. Daddy, Daddy, you came back. David held her, cried into her hair, didn't let go. Admiral Sue approached Alara. His eyes were wet. Captain Van, you violated every directive in the book. You risked the fabric of reality. You committed an act that some are calling the greatest crime in galactic history. Alara met his gaze. Yes, sir. You also saved 437 billion lives, ended the hive threat permanently, and turned a dead zone into a cradle of stars. He extended his hand. Welcome home, Captain. We'll discuss your court-martial tomorrow. Alara shook his hand. Then she walked past him, past the cameras, past the cheering crowds. She walked to the observation deck of the Mars station, the same kind of deck where she'd received the order 3 weeks and a lifetime ago. She looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a region that used to be empty, new suns were being born. New worlds, new possibilities. She thought about the hive, about the trillions of minds she'd ended, about the choice she'd made. She didn't know if it was the right choice. She didn't know if there was a right choice. But she knew one thing. When the universe gave her an impossible order, she didn't obey. She didn't refuse. She rewrote the rules. And somehow, impossibly, beautifully, the universe let her. Alara then smiled. Then she went to find some coffee. It had been a very long month.